And 50 sports Ferraris was where it really started. So he would go to the States with mum and they would go and buy these 50 sports Ferraris that were in barns, broken, old race cars that no one wanted, quite often without their original engine. He'd quite often find the original engines and reunite them with the cars and carry out these meticulous restorations that then, by the time they were finished, between 77 and sort of 1990, the cars grew in value so much that by the time the restorations were finished, they were worth 10x or 20x of what they were worth when he bought them. So it was a really good business model. And we had some great clients like Ralph Lauren. He restored over 10 cars for Ralph Lauren in the late 80s, early 90s, and did lots of stuff like that. And then obviously early 90s we had the recession. So by that time as a family, we had grown a huge collection comparatively to what we have today. And they all had to go, but the business stayed and the house stayed. I think it was the same story for a lot of people. But we managed to sort of stay on our feet and carried on as a restoration business through the 90s. But when Jeremy left university, my middle brother, in the mid-90s, he sort of went into the family business, as did my eldest brother, Justin. And Jeremy, after a few years, started sort of growing the sales side of the business. And that's really where our F40 specialism started, because Jeremy would go to Europe, buy a car, drive it back, register it in the UK, sell it. Without the internet at that time, it was a bit different. It was a bit scary going to Europe to go and buy a car. And he would go there, wait for 2 days for the money to clear, drive the car back to the UK. And so that's where a lot of our early F40s came from. And so the sales department grew, to be a decent size. And obviously over the years, we'd sold some really big cars and been involved in certainly some GTO sales and DBR1 sales and stuff like that. But to actually have a standalone sales facility that wasn't just selling the cars that we owned and had recently restored, or the occasion where a customer would say, "You've restored this car, can you sell it for me?" We actually had a standalone sales department. I joined the business in 2002 out of school and spent my whole gap year there, then went to university and did engineering for 4 years. But it was only 25, 26 weeks of the year in Bristol, which is where I was. And I was always really bored for the rest of the time. So I was always back in the business for those 4 years. And then in 2007, we moved to Little Green Street Farm, which is our home today, which isn't where we are right now, but that's the home, which is our Victorian farm that we restored at the time. And that was my project straight out of university to oversee that. And we moved the business there. And then, of course, we had the credit crunch. So it was like we'd spent all that money and suddenly it felt like it was all going to go wrong again. But we just sort of battled away and grew the business even further to where it is today. So now we're 50 staff strong. We've got over 500 cars in our care. At any one time, we'll have 50 or so cars for sale. We get involved in selling some of the most significant cars in the world. So last year we sold pretty much what I think is the best Jaguar D-Type in the world, which was a long nose car that ran at Le Mans 4 times. Countless short wheelbases, California Spiders, all the big ticket Ferraris. Unfortunately, no 250 GTOs of late because they seem to have eluded us. But also, in the more modern stuff in recent years, we were very much behind the growth, I think, in value of Porsche GT1s, CLK GTRs, getting involved in the sale of those, lots of McLaren F1s. So to answer your first question is, today I would say we're the only company in the world that does everything to the level that we do under one roof. So that's restoration, it's servicing, it's sales, and it's storage, like in this building.
And race prep. I mean, you do.
And race prep. Yeah. Actually, less so these days than we used to, but if it's a Ferrari, we'll race prep it.
Yeah.
But it's the management as well. So I'd like to think that a client comes to us and they just want us to look after their collection and give them the best advice. So if we don't necessarily, and race prep is an interesting one, if we don't think we're the people people placed, we'll make sure the car goes to the right people and that the right processes are gone through and the bills are sensible and all that sort of stuff, which I don't think anyone else in the industry can offer because we have expertise in restoration that we have done ourselves, not just subcontracted to everyone over the years. We've handled the best cars in the world. We've participated in Concours events forever with our own cars. We've raced with our own cars forever. So last year, Dad was 80 and he raced on his 80th birthday and he's been racing since he was 21. So, we know what we're doing when it comes to race cars.
I've got a question. It's just the most phenomenal story, and I've known you a long time, and I don't know 80% of that. It's phenomenal. But where do you go from here? I mean,
going from here is something I'm asked a lot at the moment, and obviously, as you know, my brother and I and one other, Andrew Hall, we are the founders of a business called Carhuna, which is an online platform. So I think for the next 5 years, that's what we're going to be focusing on, which is a platform to help dealers actually sell in the auction environment, but under their own banner and branding online because we've seen that that's become really popular. But there's been so much risk involved in it to date, whereby
Yeah.
you're buying
Yeah.
from a username, as opposed to sort of saying, can I pick the phone up, talk to this guy? Can I offer a part exchange? It's impossible at the moment. Whereas we've created this platform where all the dealers can go online, list their cars in the auction and reader, and then the buyer knows who they're buying from.
Now, I'm going to come to Kahuna in a bit.
Yeah.
Before we move on to where he's going next.
Yes.
So I want to
But
know
that's
more
next.
about this.
Yeah.
But for DK,
For DK, I mean,
DK, one of my limiting factors is our location. We're so close to London that we've got lots of space, but we can't build. So hence this storage facility that's one of our latest. We're very lucky that it's next door to our existing storage facility. It's not on site, but it's very close by to our headquarters, which is good from a security point of view. It also separates the businesses. So, I'd love to try and work out how I can further grow our footprint in terms of showroom space and storage space, that sort of stuff. And I think within the next 5 to 10 years, you'll see some sort of operation overseas for DK. I'm approached regularly about, going into partnership with someone.
I'm intrigued to know what your parents think from those very early beginnings of
Because they've seen the market change.
many times.
Yeah,
but
more
just
times than...
Well, I mean,
starting off
when it came to Brexit, they said, well, we remember when it was the other way and we were going into Europe, so they've seen.
Yeah, but I mean, to
every
go
direction.
from buying cars and restoring them in Kodak's car park to this phenomenal empire. I mean, did they ever envisage that it would come to something like this, or did they just thought we're going to buy cars, restore them, sell them?
I think so. From 77 to 89, they always say it was an amazing time. Just the business grew so quickly, and year on year, in terms of assets in the business, they doubled their assets every year, and they thought this can't go on forever, and it was an incredible time for them. And they probably just timed it a little bit wrong, that they had a few too many cars. So come 1989, they had an XKSS, they had a right-hand drive 4-cam, they had an 860 Monza, they had two 500 Testarossas, they had a lot of cars.
Nice.
Can you imagine if they could have held on to all
Yeah.
of those now?
Yeah, and actually a lot of times we have, and we always say that we sold the XKSS to buy their farm, and until very recently that seemed like the better deal.
Yeah.
And then about 4 or 5 years ago, it's like, oh, maybe we should have had the XKSS because it's worth a lot more now. But we've done so much with that farm because we've stored parts and spares, and now we have 45 cars there in various showrooms. But I think the last 15 years for them has been, or certainly the last 10 years, when we moved to Green Street in 2007, that was a big move, and they were really proud of that. And for them, I think it was like they thought that was their last hurrah, if you like. And after 5 years, they probably gradually stepped back. But there were a number of obstacles that meant that they couldn't do that. And then I think they also realised they didn't want to.
Yeah.
And COVID was definitely that. So they went from telling me that they wanted to be at home more to having to stay at home, to telling me that after 3 months, we really want to come back to work.
But I guess also having all of you involved in the business as well. I mean, that's quite unique that actually everybody's a part of it and there's been no fallings out, or maybe there have, you don't need to tell us about that. But do you know what I mean? That everybody is still kind of close in the business.
Yeah, it's been very interesting. And 15 years ago, our bank at the time, Hoare & Co, said, you guys have got to come to a family business forum. And we didn't really understand why. And then you sat around the table listening to everyone else's stories, and we were like, yeah, actually, this is very similar to our situation. I think family businesses are fantastic, especially with ours, because we all love cars, and we've grown up around the cars. So, my earliest memories are sitting in 512M race cars in mum and dad's garages at home when I'd come home from boarding school and thinking I'm doing a lap of Spa.
Yeah.
Like that's real, that happened. And, there were 917s and Ford GT40s just in original condition before they were super valuable in the 90s, just sitting in our barns at home. You just remember all of that stuff. So that's amazing. But, it's not been without speed bumps.
No, of course.
And,
no family
and
ever
today, Jeremy, my middle brother, he left in 2014. And we work together very closely now. Obviously, we've just set up a business together. But he's got his own thing. And it does, I think it's really hard for people to realise that perhaps that isn't your destination. It's like, I'll try the family business, but if it doesn't work, it is okay to go and do something else.
Yeah.
And I've seen other family businesses in the industry have the same thing.
Yeah.
Did he do?
There's a lot of pressure on you guys.
Yeah, you can go and do your own thing. And also the problem is that often you fall into the family business because it's an easy option.
Yeah.
For me, that it wasn't the easy option. It was, I went and did engineering. I thought I'd like to go and do something like work in Formula One or work for ProDrive or something like that. But I actually realised, having done a few internships, it wasn't for me, and the buzz of a deal was actually where I really wanted to be, and growing a business of our own was really where I wanted to be. And fortunately, I'm quite multi-talented in terms of I can do help with a restoration in terms of oversee it. I can sell the best cars in the world, do quite well on the racetrack. There are
I
all
was
these
about to
different
ask you if
things.
that's why you chose engineering, so that you could come into the family business, or if you had horizons
Yeah.
elsewhere. But it's interesting that you came back.
Yeah, and I'm lucky that we had the farm development opportunity in 2007. So that gave me a year of just looking after builders, which
Yeah.
I'm sure we've
You're
all done
excellent at
before,
making
which
tea.
is
probably
very interesting. When
more,
they say,
more challenging than cars.
and when they say they're going to the pub on a Thursday night, you think you realise after 3 months that means they're not coming in until Monday.
Yeah.
Mm.
It was an interesting time, and I gained so much experience actually dealing. Because I'm a public school boy at the end of the day who did engineering, who's led a charmed life, but actually dealing with guys and working out how to manage people. That was an education in itself.